listening to the mid.
Hey, Alexa. Oh, you're muted.
There we go.
There you go. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. This is Wendy. Wendy, this is Lexa.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
So thanks for doing this.
Yeah,
We're certainly not professionals. I have definitely prepared for this, probably more than I've prepared for any of our others, though, because I don't want to sound like a super old lady, because I think we will no matter what.
Whereas I will, because I have not prepared very well.
That's okay. Each of us, I think we each have our guests, and then we're a little bit more prepared for our own guests, kind of thing. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I
what's
love
going
that.
on, Lexa? How you doing?
Oh my gosh, I'm good. The sun is shining. It's getting warmer outside. I honestly can't complain. I feel like a flower ready to bloom.
That's because you're how old? Can you remind me how old you are?
So I'm 25. I'm turning
Okay,
26 in July. Yeah,
in July.
1999.
Awesome. That is so crazy to hear. When we think of 1999, like I remember preparing for the Y2K New Year in 1999. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
That's when I got married.
Oh,
But we were just talking about, so obviously a lot of this podcast and a lot of our listenership is like that we're called the mid. It's the midpoint of life, and not the mid because we're mediocre, the mid because our demographic understands it as the midpoint of life. So like the things that we're talking about, yes, I feel spring and yes, I feel all those things, but I also am like going through like valleys and hills of menopause or perimenopause, and I feel extreme rage this week. Like I have gotten into a situation of road rage this week where a woman filmed me and my kids are confirmed that I'm like on viral somewhere giving women like double fingers as I'm driving. The rage and the emotional, what's the word? Dysregulation is a real thing. So look forward to that and enjoy feeling like a flower as long as possible, Lexa.
I'm hoping to, honestly.
You will. You will. And maybe we're going to like kind of tap into why you might continue to feel like a flower tonight when we start talking about the topic.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just talk about how first of all I know you. So you work with my partner.
Mhm.
You've worked with him for a couple of years now, and we've gotten together a couple of times at dinner parties.
Yes,
And I don't even remember how it came up the first time, probably lots of bottles of wine on the table.
probably, honestly. And I
But
don't remember how it came to fruition, how we started chatting about it anyways. But I'm so happy it came up because I feel like that night minds were blown.
well, and it definitely like it's never left my mind, right? And that's why when we started this podcast, I thought what a great format to talk about something that's a bit out of our wheelhouse, right? And I think that you saw that the first time we started discussing it. It's like exactly what you said. You're talking about it to a bunch of well, no, I think we're all pretty much like I'm turning 50 this year, and I think I was probably one of the younger old people. So like 50 and up, right? Like, and you're telling us about your lifestyle.
Yeah. And it's so funny. So like I look at it as ethical non-monogamy. I used to use the word open in my relationship, but I think that ethical non-monogamy is more fitting for like our situation. And I think that with ethical non-monogamy, like there's no rule book to it either. I've recently started meeting some friends who are also like in this community who have started this or who have been doing it for a long time with their current partner, and I'm like, it was almost mind-boggling to me to like swallow, just be like, there are no guidelines to how these relationships or how loving multiple partners is. So it's interesting.
It's like a choose your own adventure. Like you guys are basically, and what's really interesting to me is you're the architects of how this works, right? Like as you go, you're building format for how this might work. So I just want to back it up a bit to say that when I think about this in a couple of different ways. So I didn't know a whole bunch about it. I know that I've got some friends my age that have experimented and are experimenting with non-monogamy,
Mhm.
and I know their stories. But what I'm most interested in speaking with you, especially around your age and your peers, are your views about traditional relationships and your choices to explore other structures of relationships.
Mhm.
And also, like, it's interesting to me because I think there's a lot of fear for people my age.
Mm.
I think we all know that marriage isn't the institution we used to think it was, and my generation certainly grew up with that being a norm. So people were expected to, get married. There was a religious aspect certainly in my family because I was Catholic, and so when there was people that even lived together without being married, there was some, stigma around that. And we all come from that world, and I think we also come from the world where we understand now most marriages are failing, or at least half of them are failing. Many less people are choosing to get married, period, right? I think it dipped. I have stats somewhere here, but I think it dipped down to like 40% in the last couple of years of people choosing to get married. It's gone down about 40%. And I think when I talk to people about it in our age group, and maybe you saw this, maybe you can echo it, but there's fear because they already know the institution is shaky, right? And then they all know, I think people my age feel really vulnerable in their marriages because this is when a lot of couples break up. Their children are leaving, they have to reacquaint themselves with one another. A lot of people have been going off on two separate paths and they have to either decide to come back together or not come back together. And I know it freaks people out to talk about new structures of relationships.
Yeah.
And I know that because when I left my marriage, I was greeted with a lot of different reactions from people. And one of the big reactions was fear because people are worried about the vulnerability of their own relationships.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could kind of speak to your view of traditional relationships and when in your life you started to think differently about the traditional structure.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned like even growing together in separate paths. Like when I grew up, my parents are high school sweethearts. So they've been together for 25 plus years. And that's all I've ever known is them together. And I think it was probably early high school and elementary school when it was really me also exploring my own sexuality and really trying to figure out what that looked like for me essentially. Um, and that being said, like I also grew up Catholic, so it was hard for me to almost come to terms with what I wanted because I felt like growing up there was a certain look we had to have, a certain way to act, especially coming from an Asian household who they already had my future planned out for me. The day I was born, like they knew what they wanted me to be, how I should grow up, what I was supposed to do. Like the life plan was already set in stone, kind of thing. Um, and maybe that's kind of why I almost rebelled in a way, very much so when I was growing up, because I was like really trying to figure out what I really wanted, but always conflicted with the sense that like my parents aren't seeing me in the light that they want, and now we're clashing because I I'm not doing what they expected me to. Personally, I always thought I was going to get married and be in a traditional relationship. I thought exploring my own sexuality and exploring relationships, I was just going to just do the norm. It was probably in university where I was realizing, honestly, my bad habits, where maybe I wasn't always faithful to my partner, or I found it really hard to just be connected and with just one person. I found my eyes kind of wandering or my feelings getting twisted with so many emotions for so many new people I was meeting throughout university. And I was like, am I the bad person here? Because now I can't control what I'm feeling for others. Um, it was really so me and my partner have also been together for quite some time now. I think we're going on 7 years. Um, we were and have been just the two of us together monogamous up until probably I would say last year, when really we have been exploring what these non-traditional relationships look like and what those boundaries mean to us. Um, I think I've said this at one of our dinner parties. Like as human beings, I think we're continuously growing and continuously learning about ourselves, what we like, what we don't like. Um, and to me, I don't think I could personally ask or expect just one person to basically be sufficient for all of those changes in my life personally. I don't think that one person could just fulfill all the needs of everything I have while continuously growing and expanding on what I like and don't like. Um, but it's a tough balance between the two and a fine line. I think with this new wave, almost with my generation of um, ethical non-monogamy or open relationships, there's a certain level of trust that needs to be established with whoever your partner is, and a lot of brutal communication.
So in your relationship then, who brought it up?
Me, it was me. I had brought it
How
up.
did you do that?
um, honestly, like, so my boyfriend knows that I'm bisexual. He knows that I've always had, like, I've previously been with girls and that I've been interested in that. And it was honestly me going to him and being like, if I wanted to explore a connection with a woman, like, would that be an issue for you? And would that cause problems between us? Or, like, are you okay if that were to happen? And essentially, he was just like, if that's something you wanted to do, that would be fine with me. And that's how the conversations kind of started. Essentially, me just really wanting to, again, explore my sexuality because I felt like we had been together for 5, 6 years. And I was like, I think it's something I'm missing and something that because we've been together for so long, I think I would regret down the line if we were to just be like life partners forever. Like something I would always think about in the back of my mind. Like, did I miss out on this opportunity? Like, did I, do I regret not taking the chance or exploring that for myself?
Which is so interesting to me because so I have a little stat here saying that a study by YouGov found that only half of millennials, and this is 2025, last month, want a completely monogamous relationship. And the dating site Tinder reported that 41% of Gen Zers, which I guess is your generation,
Mm-hmm.
are open or seeking monogamous relationships. Polyamorous relationships are also becoming more commonplace and displayed in entertainment. So this is where I think things get interesting because for us, Wendy, you can speak to this. When we were 25, this wasn't something that was on the table for us. Like
No.
we would have been going so outside the script, so beyond the border to even bring this up or discuss it. So how
Yeah.
many of us might have been thinking even sexuality at that time, like to come out as bisexual? I think I know one person, to be honest, like and that's crazy because we're not talking about that long ago. We're talking about 25 years ago,
Yeah.
long enough. But it's insane to me that that wasn't even a conversation we could have really had. Like if I had called Wendy at 25 and said, "Hey, Wen, thinking of opening my marriage or my relationship and going off to discover this," she would have thought I was having a crisis, probably. I don't know. Would you?
Well, probably back then. I mean, it's a different mind shift now. I mean, now it's, completely different. But back then, for sure, everybody, I mean, I remember hearing about two girls in high school, and that was like the talk of the town, right? Like it was like, oh my God, are they lesbians? Like it was first of all, it was a country town as well. So we were like really kind of
We were
secluded,
really
right? So
isolated. Yeah.
yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
Well,
So
and I
yeah,
don't
for sure,
want
I
to
think I would have thought that.
I think that there is definitely, we could see other paths for sexuality, but we could also see how hard they were. It wasn't something that was celebrated anywhere, certainly not in the media. So, any of us that may have experimented or thought about other things sexually did it very much behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a shared experience for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was like, oh, guess what I did last night? Like it was kept behind closed doors, like I said, and it wasn't something that was really open for discussion unless you found a really open minded person to discuss it with. And then you were always afraid of the stigma attached to it. So I'm really interested in the fact that your generation, not only is that on the table, and as I've said, like half, almost half,
Mm-hmm.
41% of your generation is looking at it from a completely different lens.
Mm-hmm.
So, from that perspective, could you tell me a little bit about when you did, start to embark more in a formal sense, I guess, into an open relationship, what did it look like for your peers and your family?
So that's another thing. It's funny that you talk about like it being taboo almost, because I have not come out to my family. Like my cousins, I think no, but not my immediate family. I just think that they grew up at a very different time, and they are very much in the mindset that like it's just not right. It's just like, so I've never felt comfortable enough to bring that up to them, which is fine. Honestly, I've come to terms with it maybe one day, but definitely not anytime soon. But with my friends, like I have a lot of queer LGBTQ friends, so like it was very comforting to know that I had that support from them. I think it was in high school actually. I had came out to my one of my English teachers because we were asked to do an assignment, write these letters, and I wrote one to her explaining how uncomfortable I felt at times with just being myself. And she was the first person, I think, that was an adult at the time, that really understood where I was coming from and also gave me that support. Um, but with friends, it they were almost my like immediate family in that sense when it kind of started, especially because I have friends who are also in ethical non-monogamous relationships. Like my one friend who has been with her partner now for 4 years, they live together and they've been non-monogamous for the entire time of their relationship. Um, and I remember first talking about it with her and just like trying to understand also like how their relationship worked and what boundaries do they set, how do they talk about seeing other people and seeing other partners. So it was great to get that insight from people who were already in that kind of relationship, especially me and my boyfriend not really knowing where to start, but um, getting that lived experience was a great asset from when we started having these almost like very difficult conversations with each other, and just
Hugely difficult,
yeah,
I would
just being
imagine.
brutally honest with one another, um, but also realizing that we were comfortable enough to have these thoughts, and it's being open with the communication, and that's what's honestly progressed our relationship, I think, almost to that next level of we have this solid foundation of trust of like these feelings can happen and these feelings can come up, but we will talk about them. Maybe we're not right in the moment, but we will talk about them, um, before they get to a point where it's like, now I feel like I'm hiding it from you.
I was just going to say, I bet you having conversations like that would definitely bring you closer together. And going back to vulnerability, I mean,
Yeah.
that is
I
seriously
can't
on the
think of anything
table.
more vulnerable. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was honestly really hard at first. And I think with us being so open and being able to have those conversations, it also means that we're both really secure in ourselves. I think I
Mhm.
also probably didn't bring it up earlier in our relationship because I didn't feel secure with my own self. Um, I think I've done a lot of work on myself in the past year and a half, where I've kind of grown in my outlook on life and how I am processing my own emotions. So that's been a difficult journey in and of itself, but having his support and him also just being maybe not at the exact same level, but also trying to work together to get ourselves to that next level of our relationship has been incredible.
Wow.
So I think too, the thing that comes up the most, and the one thing I really don't want, this to be a salacious conversation in any way, but one of the things that definitely comes up for people, the topic of jealousy, right? And we live in a society, or, when I say we live in a society, Wendy and I, our time frame, right? Like our age group looked at jealousy almost as an expression of passion,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and you see that in media, you see that from our um anything produced from our age group, like there's acts of passion, and that's how, like, jealousy is an expression of how much you love someone. Obviously this is something that your relationship would look at differently, that non-monogamous, non-traditional relationships are going to look at differently. And I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges for people who grew up looking at jealousy and feeling about jealousy a certain way. It's
Mhm.
got to be it's a massive shift, but what I think I've said this to you before, the thing that really intrigues me about it is I think that it's evolutionary. It's more advanced than our generation in that way, because jealousy is such a confine. It's such a thing to hold you back. It keeps you self-involved. So if you can supersede or learn to deal with at least jealousy on the regular, then you've evolved to something that I know it would be very difficult for the people that I talk to
Yeah.
get there. So can you speak about that a bit?
Yeah. For me, jealousy, I'm very big on you need to feel your feelings. I have said this to my boyfriend multiple times. Like, if you are feeling something emotionally, like, you need to feel those feelings. Like, I can't help you if you're not going to feel those feelings and address them yourself first. I can help you once you've understood why you're feeling that way. But if you're telling me and like starting arguments or getting angry and snippy with me for a reason that you haven't even come to terms with yourself, I can't help you. And that's again like the thing. Like for me, jealousy is I do agree with the sense that it is almost like an active passion, but feeling your feelings and jealousy is a normal feeling to have, especially when you're coming into play and bringing in multiple people. Like people want to be like not always the center of attention, but they want attention.
So
And
how have you dealt with that in your relationship, like real life? Like how
talking it through, and explaining like I'm feeling jealous because you're giving this person attention and now I'm feeling out of the loop. Or, you're going out with so and so and now I'm feeling left out. I'm feeling jealous because I'm not included. When it could have been a simple, oh hey, I'm doing this with so and so, let's do this later in the week. It's a conscious effort to kind of do that all the time. And I'm not saying we're the best at it or we do it all the time perfectly, but it's a conscious thing to do. So it's really identifying that emotion when it's happening, figuring it out for us, what that means and why it's happening, and then addressing it with whoever it is we have those feelings with.
So can I ask you, like, are you comfortable saying, like, the first time that you knew he was going to be with someone else, and I don't know what you're doing, imagine you're at home or you have other plans, like, what is that experience like to physically, because I can physically, as you're talking, I physically kind of feel like a little ill. So
Like,
what does that look like,
chat,
especially
like,
the
oh,
first
hell
time?
no.
Oh, yeah, you're going where and you're doing what? Like, but I know obviously it's not like that. It's discussed and it's agreed upon, and you have your own outlets and your own relationships. But what is that the first time that you're navigating that? How does that feel?
Like frustration, like immediate, like, oh my God, he's gonna leave me for someone else. Like he's gonna leave and I'm not gonna have the chance to like say my piece and he's just gonna go off with someone else and now we're done. Our relationship's done because he's up and decided to go and explore a connection with someone else that isn't me.
And
And
if they come back happy, how is that? Do you know what I mean? Like if I know,
but I'm happy for him when he comes back happy. Like if he's gonna go out and meet someone and explore that connection with someone, I'm happy for him because I don't want to impose any boundaries that I wouldn't want for myself. If he
oh, you're so much better than I am.
if he's gonna go out and explore a connection with someone that he's met, like I will feel jealous initially. I think like that's just normal. That's just the
And do you
immediate.
talk through that or do you leave some of that to yourself?
I leave some of that to myself because
Okay.
I think if I were to voice it, it would come out almost wrong. And I don't want it to be misinterpreted as I don't want you to do these things. I don't want him to think that I'm telling you these things so you don't explore your connections. You don't go out and meet these people because that's not what I want. Because I wouldn't want that for me. And I really am putting myself in his shoes and thinking, like, if that was me going out and meeting someone new, would I want him to tell me, no, I don't want you to go? Not really. Like, no.
And so you've mentioned boundaries a couple of times. Mm-hmm. What's an example of like because in normal, well, not normal, but like traditional, like our age relationships, I don't know how to term it. there's the boundaries are like being faithful and, and all that stuff. Like, how does that work? Like, not that I'm asking you to give your own personal boundaries, but as an example, what would some boundaries be?
I think boundaries really comes up for us anyways in conversation when it comes to like the physical part of things. Obviously, I think emotional connections can happen, and that's almost out of our control essentially. But when it comes to physical, like anything to do with hooking up or sex, like that is absolutely in our control. And that's something that we like to explore either together, um, or beforehand if that's going to happen. Boundaries essentially, they usually come up before anything physical moves forward and progresses forward in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are there vetoes in that? Like if you're feeling
Mm.
really uncomfortable, is there a veto situation where you're like, you know what? I feel like I'm really challenged by this and I can't handle
Or
it.
like even like a list, like your own kind of agreed, predetermined list of like rules kind of thing,
Yeah, we haven't, we're not written down on paper, and we haven't gotten to the point where it's like, veto, we can't do this, I'm uncomfortable. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We have talked about it, like if this were to ever happen, like, are we okay with just stopping things where they are and leaving it as is? And we've talked about that. Like, we're okay, like, if in the moment things are too uncomfortable for the other person, then that's the moment we need to stop things and maybe take a step back on what we're doing.
You know what's striking me about all of this? Because control is a big theme in my life, right? Like it's come up in my work and it's come up in my personal life about what control means in your own personal life and how much of it we give to other people and all of this. And this would be a really that would be a tough thing to let go of because you're letting go of control. And we all like to think we're in control of a lot more than we actually are. So then to consciously decide to give up some of that control because the fear, I'm assuming, and this is me talking from if I were to jump into a situation like this, the fear would be if I give up my control over who you see and how you see them and to some extent, some of the physical parts of it, then I'm also putting at risk the fact that you might choose that person. You might choose to be with that person and go down that path. And I can only assume that you guys assume that risk, right? Like you're assuming that risk and you think that that would be one of the things that might happen. But it also is an incredible release of control.
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. And it's funny that you mentioned control. Like, I've always, not always, more recently actually, but in the past few years, I've just really been on not chasing, but attracting. If he was to find a connection that he truly believed was stronger than what we have together, I can't make him stay. I wouldn't want to make him stay because he obviously does not want to be he like with me. And honestly, I do think it's a release of control and also a very vulnerable position to be in, but a release in a sense because if that's not meant for me, then I don't want it.
And I would think like what you're describing in a way would end so many bad marriages, right? Like really because people stay locked into these commitments and these unions based on obligation, based on the fact that they believe that their destiny is tied to this person.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're describing is actually not only incredibly vulnerable, but it also challenges completely the institution of marriage. So
Mm-hmm.
that being said, like what do you think about the institution of marriage at this point?
I love love. And I like so many people that I know and that are close to me are getting engaged and getting married. And I'm like, as I'm getting older, I'm like, I don't know if that's what I want anymore. Like, I feel like it's a very symbolic thing, but at the same time, it's also just a legal thing from
Well,
my.
it's
Mhm.
symbolic of tying yourself to one person in a traditional marriage. So that could be really counterintuitive for you,
Yeah.
right? Like it's literally you're tying yourself to one person
Mhm.
legally, emotionally, whatever. Like ritualistically, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, as I'm getting older and as me and my boyfriend are exploring these different types of relationships, I'm just like, we could be like we know we work well together and have been exploring these things together. And I'm like, we could do this for the rest of our lives, growing together, like, and exploring the world and these things that life has to offer us together, though. Um, and that's almost comforting in a sense too, to just know that like we would have each other. I think I've told him multiple times now that like we're stuck for the rest of life, like you, buddy, like you lock and key. But at the same time, like it's crazy to me that like I can still feel that way that we're lock and key, but I still can have connections and feelings for other people, and he can too. It's just yeah, back to what I said at the beginning, where every person, or I don't think one person could fit every box for me or check every box for me.
And this is so I've done a little bit of research. Obviously, like I've watched documentaries in the past, and then we've had our conversations which have sparked new interest to me.
Mhm.
And because I'm in a relationship that's only, what am I, 6 years old, we've had a lot of these conversations because one of the freedoms in divorcing and then recoupling with someone is you can be a bit of an architect. And now I'm recoupling in a time where these conversations are on the table. These are things to explore. And it's been such an incredible experience to even talk about these things. And to like, I brought him in to watch some documentaries about this because we're talking about this and we're both super interested in it. And there's a freedom in it because we're like, well, we can choose to do whatever we want to do within those comfort boundaries, right? Like there's no prescription for this next relationship.
Mhm.
And in that, like it's brought up probably better conversations I've had than I would have ever had in my actual marriage, right? Like because those things, once you get married, were kind of off the table and it was more traditional and there was all kinds of other issues that we won't get into, but there's a freedom in it, even though I don't think we would choose probably an open relationship where we see other people. The talk about it and the kind of delve into our own personal value system and what we want out of this relationship has been really enlightening. And it's also like a freeing thing because I think we have a little bit of room for if either one of us wanted something a bit different, we could bring that up more
Yeah.
easily because we've started these conversations, right? And the one thing that keeps coming up when I either read an article or I listen to a podcast or watch a documentary are the words that you're saying where that you don't think one person can fulfill all of the different roles you need in your life. And the other part of it that I keep hearing that I think is the other half of that is that the way that you express your love for a partner when you're in a non-monogamous relationship is that you celebrate them being able to have other love and celebrating them being able to connect with other people. And I think that's the huge departure for us. That's where the generational gap happens because we've never even spoken in those terms before.
Right.
Teresa, on your sheet, I noticed because I'm not familiar with a lot of like the terms, right? So is it pronounced polyamory? Polyamory?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Is that the same thing?
It can be. When I think of polyamory, I think of like having multiple partners, sexual, non-sexual, at the same time. Um, Ethical non-monogamy for us
Mhm.
looks a little different. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be dating multiple people at the same time, but for us, it more looks like us opening our relationship to someone else, one person. So
One person. Okay.
that's what,
So in a relationship sense or so some of the things I've seen, like some of the boundaries I've seen in other relationships, just like on documentaries and stuff, are people in open relationships would define it as the ability or the agreement to have sex outside of the relationship with however many partners you decide at the same time. But then there's also a limit. Like I've seen people put limits on, okay, well, you can do that like 3 times and then it's done because then there's more of a chance of an emotional connection. And then there's other people that are very open to like full on relationships outside of that.
yeah. And this is something me and my boyfriend have recently also kind of talked about eventually happen.
So in your situation then, is it mostly that you bring someone in and it's open with all of you, or he go off and then have a connection with someone, and you go off have a connection with someone?
For the,
Is the person always known to the two of you?
for the most part, it's the person known to the two of us.
Okay.
I think we've kind of come to like, as of recent, not recently, but now we kind of are just, it's us two and them. I think that's what works for us essentially,
Hmm.
is us having a throuple. But I think the option is open if he were to meet someone or I were to meet someone and have that connection. I think those are still on the table and could still happen. But for what we prefer, and I think what we're looking for is someone who could be part of that, like our relationship together.
So have you guys thought about having kids? Like, are kids in the plan for you?
Not anytime soon. But yes, we have talked about it.
So you've thought about it in what it would look like in
Not
terms of,
not as a throuple essentially, just because like we're both just not thinking we're there yet. So it
yeah.
hasn't.
Well, you're 25,
Yeah.
to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need
Yeah.
to think that way.
So we're both just like, I think we're both on the same thing. We would love to have kids someday. Um, but I think we're both on the same page as well, as that it won't be anytime soon. Because I think for the two of us, we've really looked at like we have a lot to like do still for ourselves. Like we both don't want to be tied down to just a baby.
No, you don't.
Mhm.
Anyhow,
Mhm.
that's my advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what brings this up for me is that there's a really, it's one of the articles I read in preparation for this was in The Guardian, and it was, I think it was written last year by Mandy Lee Len Catron. So she talked about her experience. She's in a traditional relationship. They had had kids, and then she has a friend who's in a throuple, and they had just had a child. And she was talking about it in the way like it, open to the challenge that that brought her about a traditional relationship versus a non-traditional relationship. And then obviously being a journalist, she kind of dove into it and did some research. And one of the most interesting things I thought about during it was a quote that she brought up, and I thought like this is a really interesting view of perhaps why people are a lot more open to non-monogamy right now. And so I'm just going to quote from it for a second. So she says that monogamy isn't on the verge of collapse. It's still the arrangement that most people prefer, but in some very measurable ways, the institutions that go with it, marriage and the nuclear family, are failing us. Those who want to save society by saving marriage might better be served by considering just how fragile these institutions become when we expect them to do the work of an entire community of people. So, and that to me, because I talk a lot in my personal life about the nuclear family and the exclusion of the extended family. Now, you're from an Asian family, so there is a little bit more of an extended family. Generally, I'm generalizing. My friends that come from Asian families generally have a bit of a larger community, and you have that added benefit of like multi-generational support when you have kids. But I think for society in general, we've moved from those types of structures into these very nuclear families where we've got it all. We're 4 to 6 people, however many people you are in your nuclear relationship. We don't require your help. We don't require this. We've become very insulated, isolated. And now looking at situations where you're having kids in a non-traditional relationship might be kind of a backlash to that idea.
I do like the fact that she says institutions or expecting institutions to do the work of what would take communities. People always say it takes a village, and
Mhm.
I I really do think that. Like when I think of myself growing up when I was younger, like I was always around my cousins. My grandparents lived close by. I had aunts and uncles that were close by. We were always like with family. I spent every Sunday at church with them, with family. And with these non-monogamous relationships and just having, you know, more people you can have in a sense, and just to be that village. Because even when I think back sometimes at how our family was, um, like yes, they were a village in and of themselves, but also there were a lot of closed doors that we didn't see a lot of things, we didn't hear a lot of things. Um, so like it was almost separated in that sense. But I feel like with non-monogamy, like you're always going to be brutally honest. You're always going to have to be open and have those tough conversations, which I feel like my family personally struggled with a lot of the time. And that may also be why I'm so open and upfront about a lot of these things, because I feel like growing up, it wasn't like that for me. It was very like, can't talk about things when you're struggling, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, like that that doesn't happen in our family kind of.
So the community kind of ended there, right? Like where, so yes, they're helping you raise children to a certain extent, but you're not having those conversations. So what was your parents' marriage like then? How did you experience, like, what was your model of a relationship growing up?
Honestly, very different from how they are now. Like I said, they're high school sweethearts. They've been together since they my mom was 17 and my dad was 19. Um, I think they went through a lot when I was younger. I don't think my brother remembers much because he's younger than me, but I remember my parents fighting a lot, a lot when I was younger. And there were times where my mom would literally be like, I'm going to divorce your father. Like, I'm going to leave him. Like, she would tell that to me. I was probably like 10.
That's
Mm.
great.
Because now they're like, they're inseparable, leave each other's side. Um, it's their marriage for themselves, I think, has evolved. And I think that's also kind of shaped the way I look at relationships, but in the sense of like, again, not everyone can check those boxes off for me. I don't think one person could just do it all. Like, I think I may have one person that I'm very, very strongly connected to, like how my parents are, and they have that strong connection and can work through these things potentially. Um, but like, I don't think one person could just do it all for me. And I think that's almost shaped the way I've viewed relationships and sometimes marriage, because I know theirs wasn't great when I was younger and they were working through some hardships themselves. Um, but now I see them and I'm like, of course you guys are high school sweethearts. It makes sense. Like, look at you two.
I think too, though, it wasn't on the table for my parents' generation and probably your parents' generation. So you didn't like personal happiness, personal growth, exploration beyond the marriage certainly wasn't on the table, right? Like you weren't thinking of, am I getting everything from this person? Am I getting everything from this relationship? So I think that's the other part of non-traditional relationships, that what makes it more palatable in this time of living, right? Because now, I think our generation was probably the first generation, and not as children, but as we got older, that we saw a lot of people go into that kind of self-exploration,
Mm,
with the exception of maybe hippies, but that was a blip almost, because then afterwards people went back to being very traditional again. But I think, there's people certainly at our stage of life in our generation that are doing a lot more of this self-exploration now, and what do I need to make me happy? I think survival was a different, it held more importance. Now we're all surviving, well, up until like this past year of craziness, but it's not the same in terms of what was on the top priority of importance. Like, what was your parents' priorities versus what are your priorities, right?
yeah.
Like that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. And I think of it too, and how times have changed so much. There's, especially with social media now, like there are just so many options out there, whether it's love, whether it's career, whether it's what shoes I want to buy online. Like there are just endless options out there. And I think that's also played a part in why ethical non-monogamy and open relationships have kind of really blown up for my generation, because we have just been bombarded with options our entire lives of growing up. We have endless options to choose from, and that I think has been wired in our brain that I could find it anywhere. I could find it anywhere, and like it being love, career, again, to the t-shirt I want. Like it's we've just had so many options available to us with
At
the
your fingertips, like immediately.
immediately with a swipe, and it's
Mhm.
a huge part in how my generation Gen Z is really looking at life, because now it creates all these opportunities, but at the same time it's almost freezing us in a sense where we don't know what we want because we have so many options. And I think that's what a lot of young people also struggle with, because now that we have this mindset almost of we don't know until we know. And it's hard to know everything. Even with it at the tip of your fingers, you can't know everything. So I think that's like, at least for me and my friends, I know I've talked about it before with them that like that's a theme in their lives that they've seen, that it's hard to decide what you want and to know what you want, because we have all the options.
That's actually really insightful.
Yeah.
That is very
It's like,
insightful, actually.
it's kind of, it gives us a bit of a glimpse into our kids' lives too, right? Because you're
Yes.
thinking
Yeah.
like they have all of this at their fingertips. So knowing that, knowing your experience and just taking a look at your friends around you, what would your like very loose hypothesis be for the next, like when you're our age, what do you think traditional relationships are going to look like? Do you think the role of marriage is going to be, as strong as it is now? Do you think that, how are things going to change?
I think marriage will still be a prominent institution. I think people will still want to get married. I know lots of people my age who still want to be married and are getting married. Um, I still think that open relationships in our generation, it's still almost taboo. Like there's, it's funny because me and my girlfriends in our friend group very open, have multiple people who are in non-monogamous relationships versus like my boyfriend's friend group, where there a lot of them and are very still traditional. So I think we'll still see lots of people getting into these open and non-monogamous relationships, but I do still think marriage will still very much be on the table in monogamous relationships.
So you
For
think it'll be like a big buffet, like you get to choose without as much stigma as is
yes,
attached right now.
I think it'll be a more open conversation, and I think it'll slowly start to become more of the norm and less of like, oh my gosh, that person is in a throuple, or oh my gosh, they're seeing
Mhm.
multiple people, but they're together. Like,
So it'll be less salacious in the future. Like if you could guess, then it'll just be a more open conversation. Oh, that person's monogamous, that person's non-monogamous, and
yeah, I think as time continues, it'll just be more and more of the norm.
well, this has been like a
Yeah.
completely helpful, insightful journey for us. I think it's
Mhm.
a lot of people want to talk about it. A lot of people are watching that, what was the one documentary that, or it was a reality show, the polyamory show, which when you look at it, did kind of a poor job of explaining exactly what polyamory was and what different open relationships look like. It kind of made it look odd and freakish. And I think that there's a lot, like now that I've delved into some reading, there's some really interesting, and not even arguments, but examples of how it works for people and why people are choosing that, right? And it makes a lot of sense to me when we're looking at a landscape where people are really questioning their marriages. We're watching at least 50% of marriages fail. Why wouldn't we be looking for an alternative? And even if it's not for us, is it for our kids? Is it for our grandkids to look at and say, you're not tied to one structure of relationship anymore.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting to see how this kind of evolves with the future and with the next generations to come, and how they kind of interpret it themselves. So I'm intrigued to see how this kind of moves with society and how people are going to really pick up on it, if they do at all, or if it'll go back to being just, hush hush, it's taboo, we can't talk about it. It very well could.
Well, definitely there's like a bit of a climate of regression right now, certainly in the US. So that's definitely possible. We're talking about, LGBTQ rights in general being in question. So that's definitely possible. My hope, though, it's funny, we're part of these some of these women's groups, like these over 40 women facing menopause, and there was a conversation the other day I noticed on one of them where this woman was talking about like changing sexual urges with her menopausal symptoms. Like this is, and it's funny because the conversation went to cheating immediately, and I was like, well, why would it need to go there? Because if we're looking at relationships and vulnerability and some of these harder conversations,
Mhm.
if we're more open to other structures of relationships, then isn't that an opportunity? If you are struggling in your marriage, if you are feeling it's really stale, if you are looking for something else, to also include your partner in that, because maybe it does save a marriage.
Mhm.
right? Maybe you go and do something within your own comfort zone, within your own boundaries, including other people or not including people, or going to a strip club together, or doing something that's maybe not something you thought you would do, but within the boundaries of your actual marriage. So maybe in thinking about looking at different ways to enhance your marriage that might involve other people, and acknowledging that you might have other needs outside of that one person, maybe there's a bit of bringing people back to their marriages.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concepts that probably marriages could take into consideration or at least attempt to apply. Um, like I always tell my boyfriend, like, I can't read your mind. Like, if there's a problem you're having and you're feeling it, like, I'm not just gonna, oh, he's feeling something. I should probably ask him why he's acting that way. Like, that doesn't happen. And he has to remind me too all the time, like, Lex, like, I don't know what you're thinking. If you're upset, like you need to tell me what's going on right now. If we don't want this to like get even worse because you're acting out. Like,
Hmm.
and I think the concept of like having these hard conversations, really understanding what you want and being vulnerable with your partner, like these are huge things that I think potentially could maybe save a marriage as well.
I think you've hit it on the head. I don't think it's actually about non-monogamy in many ways. I think it's actually about the fact that we've gotten into these relationships where traditionally you don't question outside of them, so you're not having those conversations. So maybe even just being open to having those conversations, like, hey, have you ever thought about this, will lead to a different level of intimacy.
Yeah. And a different level of trust and communication. Talking about fantasies, talking about emotions, like things that you probably may have forgotten to talk about over time. And as they start to change, you're not even thinking, oh, I should have this conversation with my partner. My feelings have changed toward this. I'm starting to think of this. I have this wild fantasy of this. Like I don't think people realize like having these conversations with your partner like can make a
And
world.
enhance.
Mhm.
So, Wendy, wouldn't you say that you think, like, so we have these conversations probably at girls' weekends, right? Like, we would bring this, but we wouldn't necessarily bring some of those conversations. I'm not saying specifically, Wendy, at our girls' weekends, don't. But I'm saying that
What?
women at our age discuss fantasy, discuss sexuality, discuss those things in groups of other women. They don't necessarily readily bring it back into their relationships.
Hmm.
So maybe that's what we can learn, because when you've described, Lexa, the thing that struck me the most is that every time you've described the conversations and the way in which you approach your partner and saying, okay, well, I can't know his mind. I can't. Those are things that are very different from the relationships that we've learned and that we've been kind of, groomed to have. It's that we are supposed to kind of expect that we know each other's feelings, and that that's the rom-com kind of thing we're sold, is that we're just soulmates and we understand each other and this is all natural. But what you're suggesting, and I think the thing that is striking me, is that you have to be able to have those types of conversations and hold those each other accountable to
Yeah.
their own feelings. And I think that's something that might be missing in a lot of relationships.
Yeah. I truly
Yeah.
think it's the adventure of unlearning on your own what you've originally learned and then learning together with your partner to make it that much stronger together. Um, it's hard. It's not easy by any means. But I think it makes a world of difference in the way that me and my boyfriend personally have approached our relationship and have approached some of these harder conversations. And yeah, unlearning and relearning it together has just been an incredible journey, the two of us.
Lex, I want to thank you so much. You've been so open and generous in what you've shared, and I think it really helps. I love that you've brought this to our demographic, right? Because it opens up some really important
Mhm.
conversations about the types of relationships that we want to have, and how, like, this time of we call this time in our lives this time of reckoning. Like, we're really reckoning with
Mhm.
what we've come to when you hit midlife, and what do you want for the next act. So this is super helpful for us, and it gives us a
Yeah,
lot to talk about.
absolutely.
And so, thank you so much for asking me to join and chat with you guys. It's been so great. I love talking about this stuff. Me and my friends kind of chat about it every so often, and it's always great to hear people who are older than me and their perspective because, especially not being open with my immediate family in this kind of sense. It's nice and almost reassuring to me that like there are also adults out there who don't think my lifestyle or the way I'm approaching my love life or relationships is not nonsense.
Not at all. No,
Yeah,
I'm
not
super
at all.
intrigued by it, and it's actually highlighted some really important themes, I think, for anyone's relationship. So
Yeah.
thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you so much. And it was so nice to meet you.
You should too.
All right. I'll see you at the next dinner party, Lexa.
Yes, I will. You both have a great night.
Thanks, you
You
too.
too. Bye. So yeah,
Well,
no, that
Len,
was very insightful. I'm glad that she
holy.
came on. I think that was a lot of great information for people in monogamous relationships as well, for communication. I think she was a breath of fresh air. It was nice to get the younger generation sort of insight there. I think that was really
They're
cool.
so much more mature than us.
Yeah.
Like the way they approach
I thought, oh my God.
relationships and the way they approach conversations, it's like
Yeah.
they're evolved
It's like
in a different way.
It's like evolved vulnerability evolved.
And the more like the open willingness to step into those conversations. I mean, all I could think of is, yeah, I do this at work. And I do, like, I will say that the dude and I have had some of these conversations because you're in a newer relationship. You're like, well, what do you want this to look like? And certainly in, bringing up these topics, and when I've sat with Lexa before, it's brought these, conversations into our relationship, which are very interesting. But wow. Anyway, this will lead to other conversations in other episodes to come. So
I'm sure.
yeah, that was fantastic. Okay, Wendy, housekeeping.
That was. All right, time for housekeeping. So there are no questions today because we had a special guest. So if you do have a question for us that you would like to hear us discuss or answer on the show, please send us an email at themidconversations@gmail.com. Instagram and YouTube, our handle is at @themid_podcast. Our Facebook page handle is @midpodcast. And if you go onto our website and subscribe, you will get an email notification as soon as we drop a new episode. And that is themidconversations.wixsite.com/podcast.
Voilà. Voilà. En français,
voilà.
s'il vous plaît. Merci
Oui,
beaucoup.
oui. Stylo.
J'en te plumerai la tête, tell Chad.
And that's that.
All right.
Episode 14 is
Lovely.
done.
All right.
Yes.
Next week, it's my turn.
And it is your turn next week.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
My mind's just kind of still like, holy geez, that was a lot to think about and process. And all right. It was a great departure for us. I'm really glad we did it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. And she's lovely. She's absolutely lovely.
Oh my God, is she? And the other guests, I kind of knew where the conversations were going. And this one was like, it was not, no disrespect to the other guests, but we knew what the topics were. We knew like we had all had shared experiences. This is so different because we don't have this shared experience with her, but we can learn from it. Awesome. Good stuff, Wen.
So we'll see you next week on The Mid.
Good night, all.
The mid. The mid.